Snow lifted in the air as dew from the trees fell, warm humidity floating in the wind. The cherry blossom trees wavered, while barren of leaves and flowers, but never more alive. A human girl with brown hair came to lay at the roots of one tree that was circled by other trees. The sound of a creek nearby as the water mysteriously started to rush faster than a normal day. The girl, oblivious, casting it off as the freshly melted snow ran its way to the creek waters. Distant sounds started to stir as a storm from the previous day rumbled away towards the sunrise. As the sun broke the clouds evermore, the girl suddenly felt a cold chill up her spine that made her feel nauseous. Glancing directly upwards suddenly, the morning sky began to show gleaming orange and red. The ground under her seated body began shifting in an unnatural manner. She suddenly realized why the waters were rushing in the earlier morning. Wind rushed past with a wave of force slamming her against the tree in which roots that she had rested on. Her breath swept from her for a moment as she winced and began to shield her eyes with her arms, anxiously pushing herself up against the tree and wrapping around it. Suddenly, the trees encircling the one she clung onto began glowing. She began crying and shaking her head. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. Before I continue with my story, I would like to give just a bit of an introduction here. I am whispering, but I do not consider myself an ASMRist. I just thought that a bit of a whisper would be good for telling the story. Hello, my name is Kharrma, and I'm an aspiring VTuber. This is the lore that I have written for my character, and the amalgamation of art that you see here is some depictions of my character to help bring her to life, aside from the Suica model that I am using. And so, before I continue here with, as you see at the bottom, the notepad, I contemplated making the notepad the entire screen, like, behind me, but because it's white, I figured that's not really great on the eyes. But, I don't know, maybe some people want it to follow along if it's even visible enough. So yeah, there's that. And this is my story of why Kharrma is the magical and mythical Wolpertinger girl who fell down the VTuber rabbit hole one day. Final note, again, on the topic of the fact that I'm not really an ASMRist, but I'm trying here. I recently had 5 teeth extracted from my mouth, and so if I sound a little chummy or maybe a hard lisp or something like that, it's mainly because of that. My mouth is still healing, and I can't actively hear myself back when I'm creating this recording because I'm really not some ASMR recording master artist. But yeah, I'm trying my best. So here we go. Everyone isn't here. I was supposed to know. My safety was supposed to mean I could save others. Screaming into the void around her, she let go of the tree. She started pressing one foot in front of the other towards the border of the circle of trees. The branches of the glowing trees wrapped around her neck and held her high above the ground, stopping her from escape. She saw below everything she loved and had already seized by the flames of chaos. The creek ran red. The forest she walked to approach the circle had become desolate sands already. She reached out for it all, regardless. It was still everything she knew and held close to her heart. There was nothing left without this world that she loved. Slowly the branches wrapped her inwards like a serpent. Placing her down again at the base of the tree, she gasped for breath on her knees. Nothing but rage filled her blood as she turned and started banging on the tree. Her pleas echoed around her as if she was in a dark, enclosed room. The ground beneath her feet still continued to tremble. The only light that graced her skin now was the rosy golden light from the surrounding trees. Her tears streaked her face and fell to the root of the tree. Her fists began to soften against the trunk, and she started lightly thudding her head against it instead. "Why?" she repeated about 8 times before remaining silent for a few minutes. Once again, she spun around and approached the now solid walls of black that was her new enclosure. She ran her fingers along what seemed like mist, and then wiped the surface as if it were a window. Mist settled like dust as a visualization appeared in bright blue beams. You must begin again. But don't be afraid to let go. Words written, gleaming in a ring wrapped around an hourglass. The hourglass flipped, and the black void around her turned to pure white. She braces her eyes and falls to her knees. Suddenly, the ground trembles stop. She begins pulling at the roots beneath her, shaking her head. Anger still swept across her face. Her frowning gaze remained scorned. Letting go and leaving behind cannot be the same things. There has to be a way to fix this. Why couldn't I have more time? Her screams sounded dry and rasp. Her breathing was shaky as she started tugging at one of the roots. Suddenly, the mist started giving way, and the tree in front of her started to char and burn from the top. She began shrieking, and her hands started to bleed from her intense gripping and pulling at the roots. Her blood began to saturate the root she held as it burned down to the trunk. She finally pulled free a forearm's length of cherry blossom tree root. She stumbled back and stared upwards, wiping her hair from her face. Blood from her hands stained her cheeks and covered her eyes. The root lay in her lap as she sat on her feet. The ground in front of her turned inside out as the space and fabric of the plane of existence she was in folded onto itself. Then out came a stone well in place of the cherry blossom tree. All around her, the trees that once formed her pure white enclosure had become stone pillars. She turned around again and went to reach her hand through the pure white mist when suddenly something reached back. Hands. So many of them. Tons of familiar hands who she could not pin the faces to, nor the names, but she felt their love. Slowly, she felt herself dragged to the edge until half her body hung in the balance. The root of the cherry blossom tree laid on the ground where she was dragged from, and she gasped, lunged over to grasp it. Out came both her hands holding the root, but one was clean of the blood, scrapes, and cuts she just inflicted upon herself just moments ago. Yet the other was not. Her hair fell in front of her face. The same side with the healed hand was now golden blonde. She shook her head in disbelief, turned, and saw the spot where she reached through had now turned orange and dark. It began spreading across the entire enclosure walls. Suddenly, the pure white became orange and black again, like the sky it just saved her from. In her confusion, she decided to approach the well and look down it in disgust. I'm tired of this loop. These games. I will not start over again while leaving what I wish to bring with me behind. The walls began to crack around her. Again, she had been left with no other mode of transportation besides a leap of faith. She threw the root of the cherry blossom tree into the well. She looked back again at the cracked walls of her enclosure as it began melting around her and the black void began to crawl in. As she let herself slip and fall into the well in fright, her head smacked across the edge of the stone walls of the well, and the black void gripped her by her throat, just as the tree branches did before. She reached upwards, gasping for air, with still injured hand, as her vision blurred, and felt the hands she felt she knew, but did not know, embrace her one last time. She almost didn't let go, but then she lost consciousness, falling into a river of clouds that poured a waterfall into a pool of milky, pink, foamy water. She gasped for breath after the fall and brought herself onto the surface of a giant crystal. Whispers surrounded her as she opened her eyes and rubbed them clear, again glancing at her hair, now realizing the other half had been turned pitch black. She looked down at the reflection of the crystal and saw her split-colored hair and covered her eyes again. The clicks of heels begun behind her, from nowhere, seemingly. A winged figure with blonde hair reached for the girl's blonde side of her hair and twirled it in its fingers. It then gripped tightly and began spinning her as she reached up to grab back at her hair in pain. Suddenly, she began spinning fast enough that she became dizzy and then felt her chin sliding on the floor. She felt lashes on her back, like ice-cold whips against her flesh, but too accurate for such a tool. Pain surged from her body as she began crying and feeling her back for what just happened. You've come with too much. I don't know what to do with this. I cannot send it back, and I cannot send it with you where you're going. The root of the cherry blossom tree bounced in front of her. The foot of the winged figure crushed it into two pieces with a firm stomp. The next thing the girl knew, she felt blood gracing her eyebrows and dripping into her eyes. Now you will know the price of the burden you carry. It will make you beautiful and decorated, but it will be heavy. Let these words guide you. The girl looked up at the winged angelic figure and attempted a smile, but then suddenly felt the crystal begin cracking beneath her. She began falling again. Snow lifted in the air as dew from the trees fell, warm humidity floating in the wind. The cherry blossom trees wavered, bare, but never more alive. The girl opened her eyes, staring at a night sky. The smell of cooked food filled the air and made her feel encouraged enough to stand. Around her, she no longer heard a creak, and instead heard the sound of horse hooves trucking past her. She let out a heavy sigh and put her hand on her forehead. Let me guess. That's my newest fastest mode of transportation now, she moaned to herself softly. Walking towards the sound, she sees something dart past her vision twice, but it was too dark for her to see. Then, upon her shoulder, a rat that seemingly jumped off a tree branch. "You're late," it cried at her, and she jumped backwards, falling on her behind. Whatever time I have arrived, I think it's perfectly fine. Huffing while looking for something to pull herself up on, she mistook a black large tail draped from the tree behind her as a tree branch. A giant black panther jumped down from above and snarled at her. Suddenly, the rat that initially startled her appeared between the giant cat's legs and threw a handful of sand into its mouth. The cat began coughing and wheezing. It sneezed, and the cat came apart into fluffy pieces, like a doll. The rat, grabbing both of these fluffy pieces, runs up the legs of the terrified and frozen girl and slammed them onto her head behind the ingrained cherry blossom roots in her skull. The rat then screamed again, this time into the cat ears he has placed upon her head. "You're late!" The girl throws the rat off her head and feels around to discover she had what felt like antlers and cat ears. She instantly began mentally breaking down. "I didn't want this. Not any of this. What is happening to me?" The rat looked at her confused. "What do you want? You are late." She looked up with a tearful face. "Just not this." The rat laughed, threw a handful of sand at her from his pocket again, and danced around happily. "Sorry, maybe this will help. Now I am late. We must go." The girl screamed at the top of her lungs as bunny ears flopped in front of her eyes. My existence cannot get any more insufferable than this. I feel like a slave to torment. What is this purpose? Suddenly, from the ground, her feet left. Then from the sky, she looked down in disbelief. The rat was dangling on her foot fearfully for his life as he climbed up her legs while she hovered in the air. What is this place? A sign in the distance caught her attention. What does it say? I can't read it. Flashing lights glittered far away from the tree line of the forest they were in that seemed to be calling her home, always on another journey back home. What goes around comes around, and so off she flew to her next adventure. So that is basically my official little VTuber lore story. Like, if I had a disgusting amount of disposable income to spend on VTubing and could be one of those girls who could fund a animated video, right? Those lore videos that girls make. I feel like what I just read to you would be the script of it or whatever, and that is the best way that I can portray it, is just through my words, because I really like writing. I want to explain how this story came into fruition, what the background story of it is, like sort of the hidden knowledge, I guess, or whatever. But the reason why I feel like this explanation is not 100% official or whatever is because the real explanation of the reason why she is going through multiple universes, essentially, is because Kharrma is actually an overseer of a vault that she is stuck in. So my original story was in this vault, it is archived with the entirety of the internet from different time periods. Originally, not to be one of the chosen to be saved, she was taken in place of someone else's daughter who never showed up for the role that she was to play in the vault. The original overseer father situated the vault and the safety for her and her alone. The daughter either didn't make it, didn't show up, maybe she didn't like the idea of being the only person allowed in a vault that her father made for her. I don't know. It's just, right? That's how I wrote it. So during the announcement of nuclear war about to ensue, Kharrma, quote unquote, fell down a hole and right into the front gates of an encampment of scientists with a lot of gear and equipment that they were moving into a vault, while someone was standing outside next to a mannequin with a blue and gold vault suit on it fitted for a woman, a short woman. Oddly enough, the same size as Kharrma. Due to the situation at hand, everyone assumed this short, random girl who just stumbled upon the scene was the soon-to-be overseer of the single cryo-celled vault. It wasn't until they entirely dressed her and started walking her in that the father, the original overseer, he started screaming and freaking out, but it was too late. Kharrma decides to just run straight to the entrance, and the pit boy that they put on her, oh so conveniently, she uses it to shut the door behind her and lock herself in the vault. So that's why she's there. And I call it Vault 7. An entire month she spends searching around the vault for all of the information that she feels she needs before she allows herself to sit inside what seemed to be her intended resting place for either forever or until someone comes and wakes her up. The instructions on the terminals ranged from covering topics of unlimited access to the world's information, satellites, radio waves sent around the galaxy that go back and forth in such a frequency that she would be able to navigate information from other time periods. The program that would run once she went into cryosleep, cryostasis, whatever you want to call it, would simulate a virtual plane of reality for her so that no matter how much time passes, she wouldn't feel out of body while searching for information. What she may find is what they left out. There was no indication what she's supposed to be looking for or doing. Simply, the girl who's supposed to show up for the job was supposed to sit in the pod and become a sort of master computer, run by brain power of a human with a thirst to explore and learn. There was only enough rations for someone to be awake in the vault for let's say 3 months, and she didn't want to allow herself to go into stasis only after she ran out. So, feeling the rumbles and shudders of the world above her being destroyed, she settles herself in, unknowing what to expect. And I conjured something really funny, because when I was thinking about this, I was thinking of it as a movie or something like that. That's why I wrote this other portion that I read to you first, because I was this is a very overarching story, and I wanted to write a piece that I could put into a little animated music video or something. But this is the deep background. And I feel what would happen the very first time she woke up in the cryostasis, she just wakes up, she doesn't understand what's going on, and it's a simulation that she's kind of unaware. She just proceeds to live in the past, unknowingly set that it was already there. When she rooted through the computer terminals prior to going in, she didn't exactly understand. It's in chronological order, and the only way for her to fail safe any simulations she finds herself in is they have to nuke themselves, they have to blow up. And she doesn't discover this for about 3 years. When she realizes that she's not aging, and if she dies, she suddenly wakes up wherever she last fell asleep at. and reality sets in. She understands her mind has been confused by the virtual plane that was created. She spends another year figuring out where the failsafe is to destroy that world, kind of Fallout 3 vibes, right? But like in a really giant, large scale sort of idea. I'm sorry, I have this all written down on my tablet, so that's what I'm reading it off of. Anyways, um, she doesn't realize that once she, you know, does the fail safe, that she can't return to whatever world like the first time she does it. It would require her leaving the stasis and resetting the mainframe from outside, which she also doesn't know how to do. All she can do is progress forward in different time periods, like different scenarios, for the remainder of her time in the cryostasis. Since she's alone, she sees each of these worlds as sort of a reality. Like her reality is being mixed. She's not really understanding all of the time that she's in cryostasis. Sometimes she gets herself in sort of trouble that she can't undo, and there's nothing she can do to stop herself from being killed repeatedly and forced back to the last time that she fell asleep. So she's like the failsafe has to be used at that point, like it wakes her up. And ultimately, constantly, she has to like say goodbye to relationships with people that aren't real. However, they are the only people she's coming into contact with. You know, it's like made up characters and personalities run by the simulation, and every time she has to fail safe to go to a different time period, she starts in some odd situation. No one knows who she is, where she came from. She's always the same age, she never ages, since the mainframe is copying her appearance from the cryo chamber. This tells her that her real body is safe and she's actually fine, but she wonders if she will ever actually wake up. Because the virtual plane, she keeps falling asleep. Last prior, maybe that could be where she dies, right? And it's a circle. And she fears if she experiences too many different time periods that the mainframe will run out and she may be woken from the cryosleep too early, still trapped in the vault with only a little over a month's worth of food. So yeah, an entirety living different lives and meeting different people sounds better than that sort of lonely end inside the vault, at least for now. The pain she endures every time she has to watch a plane of existence she enjoys get nuked by the failsafe really hurts her heart, though. Like, it really takes its toll on her. Especially since a few times the failsafe has been activated without her consent. That's like the tea. Like, I wish I could write like a bunch of stories about this. And there was like times where just like a plane of existence got nuked and she got thrown into another one and like she didn't even want it to happen. Scary consequences of, you know, what if there's no more simulations the mainframe has saved in the chronological order and everything like that. Like it's just like it's a very, very deep, dark backstory that I've conjured for her. And yeah, this is just my way of bringing it to life. I hope you enjoyed. Like I said, if I was somebody who had copious amounts of money to spend on VTubing, I suppose this is what it would be spent on, bringing this sort of fantastical story of what I think my lore is as a VTuber. Thank you for listening.